Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. Before everything changed, my name was Daniel Reyes. I was the facilities supervisor for Ardea Key Resort, a small private island off the mainland with a summer population around 200, half staff, half guests. My wife Lena handled logistics for housekeeping, and our daughter Sophia was 9. We lived year-round in one of the cliffside villas carved into the basalt ridge, a 2-bedroom with a small service elevator, a view over the North Cove, and a cantilevered balcony that always made me a little nervous in storms. Our island had a desalination plant, 2 diesel generators with an automatic transfer switch, a modest solar array feeding a lithium battery bank, and a maintenance tunnel network that connected the villas, the central lodge, and the staff compound. I knew every valve, breaker, and rusted bolt. That was my value to this place, and later it was our edge. The island's heartbeat ran on our daily schedule. The first ferry from the mainland usually arrived at 8:15 a.m., bringing fresh produce, laundry, and guests with hats and camera straps. The second came at 3:30 p.m., mostly for day trippers. We maintained VHF contact with the harbor on Marine Channel 16, switching to 68 for working traffic. I checked the desal plant's reverse osmosis membranes every Monday, backwashed the sand filters, and logged hourly generator readings whenever we had a load near capacity, oil pressure, coolant temperature, and fuel drawn from the bulk tanks near the dock. Storm days had their own routine: lash the golf carts, secure patio furniture, and put plastic over guest luggage if the rain blew sideways. It was a tidy system, and I took pride in it. The morning the infection came ashore, our dock hands were already on edge from the mainland news, short clips that mentioned sudden hospital surges and advisories to avoid crowded places. It sounded like a big city problem, the kind that moved fast in subway cars and food courts but died at the edge of open water. We were, everyone said, lucky to be isolated. I wanted to believe them. At 8:07 a.m., I made my routine call to confirm the ferry manifest. I remember the harbor master's voice sounded thin, like he'd slept on his desk. "Short crew today," he said. "Keep it quick." When the ferry rounded the marker buoy, it came in a little hot. The captain, someone I knew by name, didn't answer the first hail. The second time, he replied with a clipped "aye," and I told myself he was just dealing with crosswinds. It wasn't the captain who made us nervous. It was 3 passengers who refused to sit still for the health screening our front desk manager, Rhea, had improvised with an infrared thermometer. We didn't have authority to do much. This was hospitality, not a clinic. But we could ask questions, take temperatures, and politely isolate anyone with a fever in a guest services office with bottled water and a fan. 2 refused, making a fuss about rights and refunds. The third, a man in his late 50s with a windbreaker tied around his waist, tried to cooperate and then fainted in the lobby. We called for a medic. Our medic was actually a chef named Marco who had taken an advanced first aid course and kept a trauma kit under the counter for chopping incidents. He checked the man's pulse, roused him, and asked if he'd traveled through any airports. The man said he had. He slurred his words, and his eyes looked unfocused, like he was hungover. We placed him in the office with water and a damp cloth. Then Rhea called me and asked me to lock the sliding doors to the lobby from the outside. "Just in case," she said, trying to sound like it was a drill. By 9:20 a.m., 2 more guests were dizzy and unsteady. One of the dock hands, young guy named Kalen, complained of chills and sat on a coil of mooring line hugging himself. I started the second generator as a precaution because if someone needed cold storage or a ventilator, anything, we'd want redundancy. Then my radio crackled with something I'd never heard. The harbor broadcast an instruction to suspend all non-essential traffic. "Stay in place," they said. "Do not return." The captain of the ferry swore under his breath and cut his engine to idle. You could feel the island listening. I met Lena at the staff canteen. She had her hair tied back in a bandana and was checking pantry levels like it was hurricane day. Rice, canned fruit, dried beans, powdered milk. Sophia sat on the counter swinging her legs, trying to be brave. "We can keep 3 days without deliveries," Lena said. 5 if we stretch. 2 weeks if we close every guest room and feed staff only. I told her about the ferry order and the sick guests. "Then we close," she said immediately, and I loved her for that clarity. We found Rhea and the island manager, a mild, precise man named Victor who filed perfect incident reports and always wore a resort polo. He agreed to announce a temporary pause on activities. "We'll keep everyone in their rooms and bring meals," he said. "No big announcements. Calm is our best asset." He had no idea how fast we were already sliding. By noon, the lighthouse on the far side of the island began sweeping a slow, consistent beam. That light was automated, powered by an independent solar array and a small battery bank with a maintenance generator for foghorns, but we hadn't seen the beam in days, only a day strobe. Its sweep today was a beacon of hope and a puzzle. Someone had switched modes manually, or the automation had entered an emergency program. Either way, it told us there might be another person moving around out there. The first frantic call came from a bungalow cluster near the beach. "Someone is at the door." A guest whispered into the room phone, and he won't respond. The front desk tried to send a bellman and found him unwilling to exit the golf cart in front of the bungalow path because a man stood swaying near the steps, unresponsive to conversation, fixated on the sound of the surf striking the rocks. He was one of the morning arrivals. The bellman reversed the cart slowly. "He won't stop looking at me," the bellman said over the staff channel. "He's listening to the waves. He starts moving when a wave crashes." We argued for 10 tense minutes about contacting the mainland for a pickup, but the mainland radio relays were already jamming with emergencies. The harbor master stopped answering altogether. The resort manager wanted to keep the dock intact for when this passes. I said the dock was a mouth that would keep swallowing trouble. "If it stays, more people will try to come," I said. "If they're sick, we bring the problem straight in." I didn't say infection, I just said problem. He frowned and chewed his lip. "We can't strand our guests," he said. "We might already be stranded," Rhea replied. At 2:10 p.m., the decision made itself. A small fishing skiff approached from the south with 2 people waving frantically. The man at the tiller brought them in hard, too fast, his engine coughing. On the bow, a teenage girl screamed for help in a hoarse voice. Behind her, another figure sat slumped. The skiff hit the fenders and bounced, and our deck crew stepped forward by reflex to grab the bowline. That was the moment we had to decide whether the island remained a place with help and rules, or whether it became the last safe place we could salvage. Victor hesitated. I didn't. I ran to the bulkhead, pulled the emergency clevis pin on the floating dock's main hinge, and shouted at Kaylin, still shivering on the coil, to cut the aft lines. The floating dock lurched and pivoted away from the fixed pier, yawing on the remaining tie like a broken tooth. I grabbed a fire axe from the locker and split the final line. The dock drifted out with the skiff scraping along it, the girl still screaming. The man at the tiller now staring at us like he couldn't understand the physics of what we'd done. "We'll throw you a line," I shouted, but we had nothing in place for that distance, and the wind took both dock and skiff toward the South Cove out of reach. People told me later they thought I was cruel, but by sunset the skiff had grounded on the South Shoal. We saw movement on its deck, slow, uncoordinated, endless. The girl had stopped screaming long before. I don't write this to justify anything. I write it because the only reason we survived this long is that we took the island and made it smaller. We declared a full shelter in place. Guests were instructed to remain in their rooms. Housekeeping delivered linens to doorsteps and knocked twice, then left. We suspended bar service, which caused more arguments than I expected. The staff who lived on island were assigned to their quarters with radios set to Channel 2 for resort ops and Channel 16 for emergencies. I took Lena and Sophia to our villa and locked the service elevator at the ground level with a maintenance bypass. I shut down one generator to conserve diesel and ran the island on the smaller unit, load sharing with the battery array. I shaded non-essential loads, disabling the pool pumps and switching corridor lights to motion sensors to reduce draw. Numbers made me calm. Night changed the island's profile. Without the pool lighting and the tiki torches, we were a dark hump on a black ocean punctuated by the single white sweep of the lighthouse. Down on the beach, shapes gathered near the waterline, moving in the slow, aimless way I had seen in full daylight. They clustered where the waves made noise. Heads canted toward the surf. When the tide's energy peaked on the rocks, they stirred and drifted in that direction like iron filings in a magnetic field. To test what drew them, I opened the balcony door and slid a spoon against the railing once. Soft metal on metal. The figures turned as one. They didn't point, didn't hurry, they aligned, the way a school of fish turns. I closed the door and felt the villa's concrete bones. We lasted 7 days on pantry food and rainwater. I rigged downspouts into clean trash bins and ran the collected water through a gravity filter with activated carbon, then boiled a portion on the villa's induction cooktop while the generator load was light. Our desal plant could have supplied us, but running it required a high load and maintenance visits to the pump room in the lodge, and I didn't want to move around the island until I knew more about who was still healthy. We rationed. Breakfast was oats. Lunch was crackers and fruit. Dinner was rice with a jarred sauce or beans. Sophia hated the beans on day 1 and accepted them without a word by day 4. Lena took inventory on a legal pad with columns. We kept routine like a rope to hold. On the 8th day, my radio chirped with a voice I didn't recognize. "Any staff on North Ridge?" he asked. The voice sounded young and careful, as if rehearsed. I answered with my name and role. "I'm Jonah," he said. "Lighthouse apprentice. I'm not official, but I kept the books for the tours and helped with electronics. The lighthouse supervisor got hurt. I've been switching modes to save power and to let people know someone's here." I asked what happened to his supervisor. "Fell and sprained his knee," Jonah said, and after a pause, "He's resting." That sounded like a half-truth, but I wasn't going to challenge anyone who answered at all. "What's your status?" I asked. Jonah reported he had a small pantry, canned soups and crackers from the tour kiosk, and a fresh water tank for the light's washdown. He could keep the beacon sweeping at night and switch to day strobe to save energy. He hadn't seen any boats that looked safe. "They come," he said, "but they don't stop, or they stop and people don't talk." We set 10 a.m. and 8 p.m. as our check-in times. That night, Lena and I discussed moving to the maintenance tunnels. Our villa was defensible, but the maintenance tunnels let us move unseen between supply rooms. The infected appeared drawn to sound and movement more than sight. If we kept our noise profile low, we could restock without drawing a crowd. The tunnels were poured concrete with graded sump drains, low ceilings, and wall-mounted conduits humming softly when the generator ran. They smelled faintly of mineral dust and cleaning chemicals, a comforting, institutional smell that felt like work. I had keys for every hatch and an override for each keypad. The only catch, to use the tunnels effectively, I had to power the corridor sensors and the maintenance lighting, adding a small but steady load. "We can allocate," Lena said. We'll keep the lights at their lowest and bring headlamps. On our first foray, I wore work pants and a long-sleeve shirt for protection, a baseball cap, and my steel-toe boots. I carried a radio, a headlamp, and a tool roll with a compact multi-driver, pliers, zip ties, duct tape, and a roll of flagging tape. I brought a collapsible baton, legal here for security staff, because it made me feel less exposed. I left the balcony door open 1 inch and threaded a chime with fishing line, a tiny bell from a shelf in our living room, so I'd hear if a draft changed or the door moved. The infected on the beach shifted when I stepped onto the walkway. They couldn't see me from there, but they felt vibrations or heard the faint scuff of rubber on concrete. I stood still until they settled again, then moved when the surf made its loudest crash. I timed steps to the sea. The service elevator's control had a mechanical bypass and a locked panel. I set it to manual and took us down to tunnel level 1. The doors opened to a cool, dim corridor with conduits stacked 4 high, labeled with heat shrink tags I had printed myself. LV Panel A, Data Fiber North, Fire Loop. We moved slow, placing our footsteps where the concrete didn't pop. Lena led with the headlamp turned down. I counted our steps in my head like a metronome so panic wouldn't set the tempo. We reached the central maintenance room, where I kept one of our spare potable water pump heads and a stacked shelf of filters, O-rings, and lubricants. I never thought shelf labels could feel like a prayer. We took 2 replacement gravity filters, 1 backup cartridge, a coil of paracord, a small breaker lockout kit, a plug-in watt meter for monitoring draw, and a portable CO detector to keep with us in case we had to run the little emergency generator. We picked up hand sanitizer and disinfectant wipes from the housekeeping cage. We moved 1 hallway farther to the staff kitchen and snagged a crate of canned peaches, a bag of rice, and a jar of instant coffee. On the way back, we paused just long enough for me to shut a fire door and chain it, creating another layer between us and the outside. On day 12, Jonah's voice was thinner. He was rationing. He'd used the foghorn once to deter a small group that had climbed the rocks, then decided the horn drew too much attention. "They don't like bright light at close range," he added. "I can't tell if it hurts them or just confuses them, but shining the inspection lamp from the gallery made them shuffle away." He asked if we had batteries. I told him we could find some in the gift shop, which sold flashlights and postcards. "I'll hold until you can," he said. I looked at the map in my head and planned a route through the tunnels toward the lobby, then under the retail spaces. "Tomorrow," I said. The gift shop run was the first time I regretted not being a quieter walker. Even with careful steps, the storage hallway outside the shop had a resonance, a long, ringing echo that traveled down the floor slab like a struck rim. The security gate was down, but the side door for staff keyed open with my card. Inside, the air was stale and smelled faintly of cedar displays and sunscreen. I took 4 blister packs of AA and AAA batteries, 2 hand-crank radios, and 2 flashlights that could run on multiple battery types. I also took a folding solar charger meant for hiker kits. On the way out, we heard a sound that didn't fit the surf, a soft, rhythmic bump, like someone trying a handle without a plan. We froze. The bump came again, then a pause, then the hum of the building settling. I counted to 60 in my head. We stepped low and slow, hands out for balance, and made it back to the stairwell without testing if the bump had a face. Jonah cried when we delivered the batteries. We didn't see him. We left a package at the utility shed halfway to the lighthouse with a note taped inside a zipper bag. 2 hand-crank units, 2 flashlights, 8 packs of batteries, 1 solar charger, and instant coffee. We wrote, "Stay on schedule, sweep light only twice each night. We are here." That evening, the beam moved a little faster, then slowed to its normal cadence, like a nod. We kept a schedule. Morning, rain collection, filter change if needed, 10 minutes on the balcony for ventilation while they were less active, radio check with Jonah. Midday, maintenance items. Grease hinges, test locks, walk the tunnel to check for water leaks and rodents. Afternoon, prepare dinner, quiet time, school for Sophia with handwritten math and reading from a paperback I had salvaged from the lobby library. Evening, radio check, nighttime quiet. The schedule was the trellis our minds could grow on. Without it, we would have fallen into the panic of constant speculation. With it, we could take inventory of real things: gallons of water, liters of diesel, kilowatt hours used, packets of medicine, rolls of trash bags, candles. By day 16, we started hearing other voices on the radio. Some were clear calls for help, others fragments of arguments or prayer. One voice kept repeating a marina slip number as if someone would come. Another said, "Don't come south," with no context. Once, at 3 a.m., a calm voice read, "Coordinate slowly," then said, "Small group, friendly," and then silence. I didn't broadcast back. Every transmission is a flare, and flares bring help and trouble equally. On day 19, we ran the desalination plant for 3 hours. I did it for 2 reasons. First, to top up our potable tanks. Second, to check that the system still behaved under power cycles. The plant was in a concrete room with a seawater intake screen, a pre-filter manifold, high-pressure pump, and a rack of membranes that sang at high frequency when pressurized. The product flowed into a 10,000-liter tank, and the brine discharged back to the sea. I checked pressures and salinity with the handheld TDS meter. The numbers were good. I shut everything down after 3 hours to avoid drawing attention. The infected didn't care about the hum of machinery unless it resonated the floor. People, though, might see the steam on the seawall and come thinking the island was a lighthouse of civilization. On day 21, we discovered we weren't alone in the villas. The maintenance tunnel carried voices better than I realized, and when we passed under Villa 5, we heard the whispering cadence of a parent telling a story to a child. I nearly knocked on the floor to say hello. Lena's hand on my arm stopped me. "If they're safe, our noise is a risk for them," she said. "If they're not safe, we don't want anyone following us." We left a package at their service door the next day. 4 cans of soup, a note that said, "You're not alone, stay quiet, use the tunnels. 10 o'clock and 8 o'clock check-ins if you can." We never heard their voices again, and I still don't know if that means they moved or learned to be silent when anyone passed by. On day 23, we found proof the ferry captain had tried to help until the last. We were exploring the south workyard to scavenge rope when we found a clipboard with a final manifest rubber-banded to the handle of a pallet jack. The last 3 lines were blurred with water, but you could still read the freight: bottled water, medical supplies, and a crate of rechargeable radios. The radios never made it. The note at the bottom said, "Leave on dock at second bell." The bell never rang. By day 24, the infected patterns were clearer. They preferred the low-lying beach in the evening when the surf was strongest. They moved to the lee side of the island when the wind stiffened. They didn't navigate stairs well, but they didn't stop trying. They were quiet until they weren't. Then they made a low, unmusical sound that carried farther than a normal voice. I kept Sophia away from the windows when they congregated. She understood, and when she forgot and peeked, she came back to the table with her jaw set. "Are they still listening to the waves?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "They like patterns. We do too. We just choose different ones." Day 26, Jonah reported a problem at the lighthouse. "Battery voltage is dropping faster each night," he said. Panels are clean, so I think one of the strings is underperforming. I can swap the controller, but I need the spare that's in the storage shed by the visitor center. I think there are also spare fuses in Box C. I had installed those fuses last spring, labeling them with a paint pen. We can go at low tide, I said. We'll use the cliff path above the tide line. Jonah said he would keep the light off for one night to conserve charge. I'll hang a reflector as a passive marker, he added, to catch moonlight. I don't like cliff paths on good days. On bad days, I hate them. The path cut across a basalt face that shed pebbles with every step, and it canted toward the drop more than I preferred. We left before dawn, when the infected were at their lowest activity, moving like sleepwalkers in the dim. I carried a coil of rope, 2 carabiners, the tool roll, and a pry bar. Lena had the headlamp and a small pack with water and crackers. We moved in bursts, timed with surf hits. Twice, we had to flatten against the rock and wait, while figures moved along the strand below, pausing at driftwood as if it might explain anything. Near the visitor center, a gull startled on the railing, and my heart felt like a fist in my throat. The storage shed padlock was stiff but opened with my key. Inside, I found the charge controller in its original foam, 2 spare fuses, and a roll of 12-gauge wire. I took all of it along with a handheld mirror and a wrench set Jonah had left labeled LH maint. On the way back, we cut across the ridge and paused in the scrub to avoid a group that had drifted inland. Their heads tilted as one when a gust moved the pines. The rope felt heavy on my shoulder, and I thought of every training I'd ever had about moving weight and keeping balance. Jonah met us half a mile from the lighthouse in a cove where the waves gnawed the lower rocks into wet steps. He was thinner than his voice suggested, with a long, nervous face and a windbreaker zipped to his neck. I didn't know if you'd actually come, he said, and his hands shook when he took the controller. We had a schedule, Lena said. We keep our promises. He gave us half his crackers in exchange for the parts. I tried to refuse, but he insisted. Trade makes this feel normal, he said. He told us the supervisor, Eames, a retired electrician, had twisted his knee on the stairs the first night when a guest from the lighthouse tour returned after hours insisting on help. Eames had tried to calm the man, slipped, and hit his knee on the riser. He's in the watch room, Jonah said. He's quiet. That word again, quiet. We helped Jonah install the controller, working fast with the lighthouse door barred and our ears tuned to the wind. The lighthouse smelled like old paint and brine. The gallery windows had salt crusting where spray reached them in storms. Jonah's hands were steady on the wires even if the rest of him trembled. He swapped the controller, seated the fuses, and checked the voltage with a meter. It'll hold, he said. I'll run the 2-hour sweep at midnight and nothing else. We left him with 2 of our backup water filters and a jar of coffee. He pressed his lips together like he didn't want to cry twice in a week. On day 29, a sailboat approached under power. It circled twice just outside the reef and then cut its engine. A man on deck shouted something we couldn't make out. He held a megaphone but used it poorly, letting the wind take half his words. The infected on the beach turned toward the sound. I raised the binoculars and saw 3 more figures hunched in the cockpit. One shifted strangely, like he was listening to something beneath the deck. The man on the bow shouted again, then lobbed a flare high. The flare arced and burned bright white before hissing out. I knew that light would call people. I didn't answer. I watched as the sailboat drifted slowly. After an hour, it started its engine and nosed north. It didn't return. I tell this next part because it's when our rule, stay hidden, faced the strongest pull to break. On day 31, just after dawn, we heard the distinct sound of a child crying somewhere near the old service road above the staff compound. It was not the wind through a pipe or a gull. It was a child, calling Mama in choppy breaths. Sophia clutched my sleeve and whispered, "We have to help." Lena and I looked at each other and felt the map of our island shift. Sound is a lure. That was a fact. Children cry. That was another. The road above the compound had a blind corner and a culvert access that led toward the beach. If someone wanted to draw us out, it was a good place, and my brain began overlaying the island with red X's and green check marks. "We go through the tunnel and look from the grate," Lena said, her voice steady. "We don't expose ourselves without eyes." The grate above the culvert had a screen we hadn't cleaned in months. I wish I'd scrubbed it, because then maybe I would have seen the details faster. We listened. The child sobbed, quieter, then resumed louder, as if repeating a loop, or as if someone was prompting. When the sound reached one pitch, figures stirred in the brush 50 yards downslope. The brush moved where there was no wind. I crawled forward and found a better angle. The crying came from a small speaker placed in a plastic bucket half filled with leaves, an improvised amplifier. The speaker cable ran to a battery pack with the brand taped over. Farther up the slope, two people crouched in camo jackets, scanning the compound with binoculars. They had improvised masks and gloves. They weren't staff. They weren't guests. They were looking for the kind of people who go to help. I felt something I didn't like in my chest, a mix of anger and a flat, cold acceptance. I whispered the truth to myself. People were going to be a bigger stranger risk than anything at the waterline. We backed away, slowly, and I wrote a rule on the legal pad when we got home. If you didn't arrange it, you don't answer it. I underlined it twice. Sophia said, "But if I was out there," and Lena said, "You aren't, because we don't go out unless we make the plan." We hugged her, and we sat for a long time without speaking, listening to the sweep of the lighthouse and the distant gulls. The crying stopped around noon. That night, figures moved close to the place where the bucket had been. The ones in camo didn't retrieve it. I don't think they wanted to come that close to their own bait. On day 33, our diesel levels were low. The bulk tanks by the dock had more fuel, but reaching them meant crossing open ground visible from the south. I decided to tap the maintenance reserve tank behind the staff laundry. It held a few hundred liters for emergencies and powered a small backup generator. If I could couple it to a hand pump and bring it to the main generator room in jerry cans, we could stretch power days into weeks. Lena and I moved at 2 a.m., when the infected were least coordinated. The laundry room was a cavern of silent machines with belts hung like sleeping snakes. I removed the panel on the reserve tank, attached a siphon hose, and started the hand pump. The smell of diesel was sharp and familiar, and we worked by headlamp, wiping drips with rags. We filled 4 cans and secured the caps with tape. On the way back, a cartwheel squeaked, a tiny sound that felt loud enough to make the island listen. We froze. A figure appeared in the open doorway at the far end of the corridor, silhouetted. It moved one step, paused, tilted, another step. Lena squeezed my arm. I turned the headlamp off. Darkness wrapped us. We waited. The figure shuffled into the room and away from the sound when a gust passed through the open window. We took 3 slow steps in the opposite direction and didn't breathe until we were 2 fire doors away, our hands slick with diesel and sweat. On day 35, the mainland radios were almost entirely static. I caught a single coherent sentence: "Stay off the bridges," and then nothing but a carrier wave and the occasional clipped syllable. The weather changed. The wind came from the northeast, flat and cold, and the infected crowded into the lee near the kayaking beach. We started to use the tunnels almost exclusively. Sophia could now move in darkness, counting steps to each corner, and when she bumped her elbow, she swallowed the sound. I hated that she learned it, and I was grateful she learned it. We made a small garden on the villa balcony. 3 plastic tubs with soil scavenged from planters and a handful of seeds from the kitchen herbs kit. Basil came up first, then small lettuce leaves. The herbs wouldn't feed us, but tending something gave days a shape. Lina taught Sophia how to prune without damaging the stem, and how to water in the morning so the plants could dry before night air cooled the balcony. We cut the leaves into rice dishes and pretended it was a feast. The infected below ignored the smell of fresh green. They only turned when a gull landed and cried. Jonah kept the beam alive. Sometimes he flashed it twice at 9 p.m., our private signal, and once he flashed it 3 times to indicate he'd fixed the gallery door latch. "Eames is still resting," he told me on the radio. "He doesn't talk much." I didn't ask to talk to Eames. I didn't want to force Jonah to choose between truth and a lie he thought we needed. Instead, I asked about the lamp oil inventory and the gasket on the watchroom porthole. We spoke in tasks because tasks are what you can finish. On day 37, we found evidence of another small group using the North Utility Trail. A snare trap hung at ankle height near the camphor trees, placed clumsily but enough to catch someone moving fast. I took it down and left it coiled in the open with a note. "We are here. We move at night. Do not hunt people." The note might have been naive, but I needed to put the words into the world. That night, the snare was gone. In its place was a small pile of scallop shells and a sealed mylar pouch of dehydrated soup. A trade. We took the soup and left them 2 water filter cartridges. We didn't try to meet. On day 40, a front brought heavy rain and a short blackout when the generator tripped on a transient load. The villa went dark. The world shrank to the sound of rain on glass and our breathing. I tabbed through the start procedure in my head and then moved. Check fuel, check coolant, reset breaker, start sequence. Watch frequency and voltage stabilize. Bring load online gradually. Back in the villa, lights rose in a dim curve. Sophia cheered and then clapped a hand over her mouth, eyes wide. We all waited for movement below. The rain covered our mistake. I add these technical notes here because they helped. If you must move past a glazed door at night, place your hand flat against it first to absorb the change in pressure from your movement so the door doesn't sigh against the seal. If your headlamp attracts attention, angle it down and cover it with your fingertips to make a narrow slit of light. If you must open a can quietly, score the lid with a rotary opener and work it slowly, easing the last bit so it doesn't pop. If you must break a stick to use as a wedge, twist it first until fibers give silently, then bend. Silence is a skill. You improve with practice. On day 42, Jonah reported that someone had tried the lighthouse door after midnight. They knocked softly 3 times, paused, and then again, the way a guest might who didn't want to be rude. He didn't answer. He watched from the gallery through the slit of the shutter and saw a woman in a rain poncho swaying slightly, her head tilted. She stood perfectly still for 10 minutes, then turned and walked to the edge of the platform and stared out at the water. "She looked like she had a place to be," he said, voice flat. But when the foghorn from the old buoy sounded in the swell, she moved a little toward it. Sound, always sound. By day 45, we could no longer pretend the resort would reopen. The pool had a film of leaves and dust. The beach cabanas sagged. The laundry's detergent smell faded to something colder. We were the island now. The 4 of us we acknowledged by name and whoever else stayed quiet in their corners. The ferry was a thing from a past map. The mainland might as well have been a painting that had slid off the wall. The change on day 47 was simple. A boat approached with someone who knew how to move on water. It was a rigid inflatable with a center console and a 4-stroke outboard, hugging the contour lines outside the reef as if someone had studied our chart. They cut their engine in the shadow of the cliffs, drifted on the swell just outside the echo of the surf, and waited. They didn't speak. They didn't throw a flare. After 20 minutes, they raised a hand, palm out, and then pointed twice. Once to the lighthouse, once to the North Cove. Then they eased the engine on the lowest throttle and ghosted north. "What do we do?" Lena asked. "Nothing," I said. "We stay hidden." It tasted like ash, but rules keep you when hope tries to bargain. At 10 p.m., the lighthouse beam swept its usual cadence, then paused for 3 long counts, then swept again. A code we hadn't agreed on. I raised the radio and held it in my hand without keying it. Habit almost made me press the transmit. I didn't. Instead, we waited and listened for what the ocean decided to tell. Around midnight, we heard a single, distant engine, the kind of small craft you'd use for a quick crossing. It didn't approach the dock. There was no dock to tie to. It idled beyond the reef, then cut out. We now had a mystery. A boat that moved like it knew us, and a lighthouse that paused like it had a message. We did what we always do, slept in shifts and did not change the pattern. Morning of day 48, Jonah's voice carried a tight excitement. "The boat came to the lighthouse during the night," he said. "They tied off to the cleat on the lee side, moved careful, and left a package with a red cloth." He waited a breath. It had a laminated card. "Quiet friends, we see you. We make a run every 3rd day at moonset. Leave a white cloth if you want to trade, no voices. North Cove, 1 person only. If you break the rule, we stop." There were batteries, a first aid kit, and a note about where they stash extra fuel in a cave south of the lighthouse. He exhaled, a shiver in the sound. "They exist," he said, and he didn't need to add what we all felt, and they know how to do this. I took the card from Jonah 2 hours later, meeting him at the same cove as before. The red cloth was gone. He'd kept the batteries and split the kit with us. The laminated card felt like a passport into a different layer of maps. Whoever wrote it knew we were worth contacting and also knew the risk of contact. Rules, white cloth, moonset, 1 person. I ran the numbers in my head. If they came every 3rd day, moonset times shifted enough to make the schedule unpredictable by anyone without a tide table, which reduced ambush risk. 1 person at a time limited both resource challenges and deception. No voices meant they wanted the ocean to stay loud and humans to stay quiet. It was disciplined. I trusted discipline. Day 49, I prepped for the first trade. We agreed that I would go because I knew the tunnels best, and because if I was caught, Lana could keep Sophia alive. That's how we said it without saying it. I packed a small bag with 2 filter cartridges, a bundle of paracord, a laminated card with our needs list, more batteries, rice, a small replacement inverter if they had one, and children's multivitamins. I also included a tiny item of human weight, a postcard of the island at sunset, not for the trade, but to remind whoever we met that we weren't shadows. I tied a white dish towel to a length of driftwood as a flag. We rehearsed the route twice in daylight and once in half light, marking silent step points with bits of tape no one would notice but us. Moonset at the appointed hour came with the ocean breathing like a sleepy animal. I moved through the tunnel, climbed the service ladder, and paused at the hatch, listening. No bumping, no clatter, just water and wind. I crawled to the edge of the North Cove and planted the driftwood flag behind a rock where it could be seen from the water but not from the ridge. The boat appeared as a darker shape against dark water, the way trained eyes move before you see the whole form. It idled without sound. When it drifted close, I saw 2 figures. One stayed at the console. The other, smaller, crouched near the bow with a line in her hands. She wore a dark watch cap and a rain jacket without markings. She pointed to a cleft in the rocks where a swell washed and withdrew. I clipped our trade bundle to the end of my rope, waited for the swell to rise, and tossed it so it would land by the cleft when the water retreated. The bow figure reached with a boat hook and drew it in with a smooth, practiced motion. She placed a sealed dry bag in the same place and tapped twice with the hook. Metal on rock. A sound shorter than a gull call. I waited for the water to lift it into the cleft, then pulled it in. She raised a hand, palm out, and the boat receded into formless dark. Inside the dry bag, batteries, 2 pounds of rice, a small hand-crank charger, a sheet of paper with a tide table for the next 2 weeks, and a note written in block letters. We use channel 72 only if you're in immediate danger. 2 short clicks for yes, 1 long click for no, no words. There was also a small bag of dried mango. I brought it home and put the mango on the table like a crown. We each ate 1 piece. Sophia closed her eyes as she chewed and didn't speak, and I felt both broken and made whole by the sight. I am writing this on day 51, while the lighthouse sweeps slow and the ocean keeps its steady conversation with the rocks. The trade group, whoever they are, exists and knows caution like a language. We have enough diesel to keep power on a rationed cycle for another 2 weeks if we run the plant only every other day. The garden gives us a fistful of herbs, and we're sprouting lentils in a jar. The infected still listen to the surf like it is telling them a story they're almost able to understand. People who wear camo set lures, and people who wear rain caps move boats like whispers. In the tunnels, other families keep schedules we don't see. It's a village made of closed doors and shared rules. So here are the rules we live by, recorded for us as much as for you. 1. Stay hidden unless you are the one who arranged the meeting. 2. Keep a schedule. Sleep at the same time, move at the same time, change only if the island changes first. 3. Listen more than you speak. 4. When you must move, move with the waves. 5. Do not answer voices that don't know your name. 6. Trade with those who respect rules and silence. 7. Keep the lighthouse sweeping because light is a language and someone might be reading. 8. Write things down, because memory bends when you are scared. 9. Teach your child how to move in the dark and also how to grow basil on a balcony, because both skills belong to the future. 10. Be ready to leave even when the island feels like all you have. Leave when the plan you made in daylight tells you to go. If we ever do go, it will be at moonset, 1 person at a time with the same quiet the ocean taught us. It will be with the white cloth and with a bag of things we can trade, and with the radio on channel 72 ready to click twice. It will be with the lighthouse sweeping behind us, not as a goodbye, but as a note pinned to the dark that says, someone learned to live here without making noise. Someone kept the diesel clean. Someone fixed a charge controller and labeled the fuses. Someone stayed hidden, and that was enough to make a map to tomorrow. Day 52 begins in a few hours. The plan says I check the pump seals, Lena checks the pantry, Sophia copies tide times, and we meet Jonah on the radio for a no-words check. The ocean will keep moving. The beam will sweep. Down on the beach, the figures will tilt their heads and turn wherever sound lifts, then settle when it fades. And up here, in the villa bolted to the basalt, we will take 1 more careful breath and start our tasks again. I have to add what happened the afternoon after our first trade, because it taught us how quickly the island can test a new pattern. Around 4 p.m., 2 people in bright windbreakers came down the main path from the staff compound carrying tote bags. They moved like tourists trying to look brave, too fast, scanning side to side. They called for help in normal voices, not whispers. The infected on the beach turned as a group and moved inland toward the sound. The windbreakers saw them and broke into a run up the stairs toward the lobby. I watched from the balcony, fingers tight on the railing, and did not call out. We had no way to bring them in without opening a door that would bring a dozen figures with it. The pair reached the lobby and found the sliding doors locked. They pounded. The sound drew others, human and not. Then a third person appeared from the side, a staff member in uniform, Rhea. She slipped from a service corridor I knew led to the back office and waved the windbreakers toward a narrow passage. They squeezed in and disappeared, and Rhea slid the panel shut and braced it with a mop handle as if she'd practiced. She looked toward the beach once, then backed away into the corridor. I don't know where they went, I hope into the tunnels. I wrote another note and left it at the service hatch near Villa 5. We saw you. We are mapping safe routes. Channel 2 at 8:30 p.m. for silent clicks. That night, Rhea clicked twice. I clicked twice back, no words. Small victories. They add up to a map you can hold. A map is the opposite of panic. We found another small stash spot while checking the north HVAC room. Someone had hidden protein bars under the third step. We added 2 of ours to it. Trade is easier when it feels like sharing a secret rather than settling a debt. I also learned to love the plainest tools. Wedge doorstops, tape, a hand tally counter to mark steps without whispering numbers. If you must count, click with the tally when the surf crashes so the sound disappears inside water. On day 55, the trade boat left a larger package and a note. Storm in 2 days. Secure high. Avoid east side during surge. We will skip 1 cycle. The tide table aligned. The storm came at dawn on day 57, pushing water into the east coves and lifting driftwood like battering rams. The infected huddled near the kayak shed, uncomfortable in the wind. We pulled the balcony planters inside and locked the balcony door. The lighthouse beam cut through rain like a metronome. We lost power once when sea spray reached the lodge subpanel. I reset it and applied extra dielectric grease to the gasket. We burned 3 candles and ate soup while the wind pressed its hand against the glass. In the morning, half the cabanas were gone, and the island smelled clean and wrecked in the way storms do. The trade boat kept its word and skipped a cycle. We didn't go to the cove. Rules are trust. Trust is safety. There is one more piece of our story I need to write before I run out of space. The day we decided to prepare to leave. Deciding to prepare is not the same as deciding to go. It simply acknowledges that maps are bigger than islands. We made a list with 3 columns: must take, nice to have, and weight we can't carry. Must take: water filters, radio, batteries, headlamps, multivitamins, rice, lentils, paracord, first aid kit, tide table, laminated rules, 2 knives for utility work, duct tape, spare socks, rain jackets, a small tarp, and the legal pad with island diagrams. Nice to have: a small solar panel, the hand-crank charger, dried mango if any remained, 2 books, 1 for skills, 1 for heart. Weight we can't carry: the induction cooktop, most of the tools, the heavy battery bank, the big generator keys that unlock nothing off-island. We felt the loss while writing. Then we felt lighter, because the plan existed where fear had been. I checked the outboard at the old dive shack, a light aluminum skiff with a 20-horse outboard that had been winterized. The fuel in its small tank was stale, but I could run it if we mixed fresh fuel and worked the carburetor. The trade group might have a better craft, and we would follow their rules if they offered passage. If not, the skiff was a contingency. I prepared it in the quiet hours, cleaning contacts, checking the prop cotter pin, laying a tarp over the hull. I didn't start it, sound as a flare. That night, I wrote on the legal pad a final section. one I hope future readers take as advice and not as prophecy. If you must choose between a big move and a small improvement, choose the small improvement first unless the tide or a fire tells you otherwise. Fix a door, label a panel, share a battery, make a rule, and keep it. When your heart says to shout, whisper into a radio and click twice. When you want to run, lie still and count. When you must walk, walk with the waves. Morning again. The beam returns to daytime pattern. Somewhere in the island's tunnels, feet move softly. On the beach, the figures turn, aligning to the sea. On the water, a boat waits for moonset on a schedule only careful people keep. We're here in the cliffside villa, eating canned fruit, catching rainwater, trimming basil, and marking our days in pencil. Being as quiet as an island can be without forgetting we are people. We thought isolation would save us. It didn't. Rules and patience did. And somewhere beyond our map, the mainland is another story, unfolding in different rooms with other rules. When we leave, if we leave, we will carry this island like a blueprint of how to live when the world insists you make less noise. Until then, we stay hidden, not as cowards, as caretakers. Of this place, of this child, of the small beam that still sweeps the water for anyone who learned silence in time. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.